Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. This is going to be my thoughts and basically kind of review of the debut of Rin as Kamen Rider Majade, and effectively reviewing the episode that it happens in, also touching a little bit on what's been going on with the series. I kind of already did a little bit of this when I talked about Daybreak, but that mainly was talking about the Daybreak stuff. This is going to sort of be my catch up, even though next week I will also be talking about Valvarod's power up as well. But let's talk about, the main part of this video, which is the debut of Rin. Now, technically speaking, Rin already debuted in episode 1, but I meant the debut of Rin as Majade. Technically, she debuted as Majade in the movie that just came out, and they do reference it here, so you might feel a little bit lost. I couldn't find a full synopsis. I don't really care to be honest, because it's not that big of a deal. She basically just mentions at one point, like, I wish I could transform like before, and they show a brief flashback, and then Hotaro says something to the effect of she has powers like before. I feel like, that's kind of nice. They have that connective tissue to show that movie is canon to this. You're not going to feel too terribly lost, because nothing about the plot of the movie is about that. It's just that she had it before. I think it takes a little bit of the wind out of it for this. I wish that they had maybe just had Hotaro say the line about, oh, she has the power like before, and not shown the flashback, so maybe you might have missed it, like the reference, and you might not have felt like you missed something. But I'm sure at some point, or somewhere, there's a synopsis. I basically just looked on the wikis, but I'm sure the wikis will eventually be updated, and you can go on a board and get the info, and the movie will be available at some point when somebody subs it, when it becomes available. But that is worth noting. But this is the show debut, and that will happen a lot. If you've watched Rider or Sentai before, mainly Rider, if you've watched it in any capacity regularly, when the movies come out and they tie in, sometimes you'll feel like you missed a beat, but it's not a huge deal. But overall, it was a fine debut. That's kind of the way I feel about almost everything, outside of my deep, deep hatred for Hotaro that grows every time I see him. The show's been better. It hasn't been great, but it's been generically fine, and I'll get into that kind of more when I talk about the show overall. But that's kind of the way I feel about Rin. I like Rin just fine. I'm not like, oh, she's my favorite of the show, she's the best. I'm not like, oh, she's the worst like Hotaro. She's alright. I like her fine. Her story's pretty by the numbers, and that was kind of the way her debut was. It was generically enjoyable. It kind of mostly revolved around the idea that she's clinging to, the rules of the alchemy school, even though they're not in it, because that was what her father valued, and it's like a tether to him. And it's kind of about her letting go of the rules, and she ultimately comes up with this resolution of, I make my own rules. But I think the idea was, at least this is what I inferred, is more about, and this comes from a conversation she had with Hotaro of all people. Her father was following the rules. It wasn't so much about following the rules letter to the line. It was about the spirit of the rules, about what they mean, about what they uphold, not necessarily strictly following them letter to the line, like I said. Kind of like what the Jedi should be. Instead of following the code so strictly, they need to be about embodying the spirit of those rules. And that's, I think, what her ultimate resolution was, and that opens her up to get the power. And it is a little bit confusing, not confusing, but it's like that Toku magic where, oh, she opened herself up so she gets the powers. I don't know how that worked in the movie. Maybe that will be explained in the movie, because it's less like, Hotaro's two goggles just turned into the driver. So this is Toku nonsense. Man, I hate that stuff. But yeah, it's not like it was a device given to her or made. It's a little bit of Toku nonsense. It was more, emotional than it was technical. But that's how she kind of overcomes that and gets to transform again. And I've talked about this before when I discussed, when the suit was revealed, but I love this suit. One of my favorite suits, maybe my favorite Gotchard suit, I'm not sure, but I'm a sucker for a good, clean, white Toku suit. It just has a clean, heroic look, and I really like the look of it. I love it a lot. Strong debut. The belt sounds are overall pretty good. It's kind of got this, double voice thing going on. I really like that. So yeah, overall solid and enjoyable debut. Nothing too exceptional, but nothing bad either. I was a little bit bothered by, and this is a nitpick, I know this is nitpicky and probably is spurred on by the fact that I dislike Hotaro so much, but I wish that he didn't have to, he wasn't really a debut, but they did show off that his new fire form can also use his other ability forms, which, again, it's not a full-on debut, but at the beginning of the episode, he's fighting and he overheats, and the two guys fix it for him, and then he transforms into the samurai form but with fire, and shows that off at the end. And again, it's very small, but I'm like, do you really have to show off another toy function thing in Rin's debut as a rider? Again, it's a small thing, but it just took me out of it, because that's one of my least favorite things about Gotchard, is it's one of the worst series at hiding that Toku's just a toy commercial. I'm like, you could have put that anywhere else. Come on, you can't even let her have her debut as a rider without, did the toy sales, did you get that many more toy sales from doing that? There is also some stuff going on with the villains, mainly continuing a little bit of that thread with the young villain who they're definitely going for a redemption arc, and I'm not here for it. I'm tired of that. Every time there's a human villain, or I'll be curious to see what happens with the other two. There's kind of some dissent in the ranks going on with the new villain guy and them. I forget what his name is. I'm never gonna know it. I don't care about any of the people's names. But there's a little bit of dissent in the ranks going on there with how they're treated and stuff. But I'll be curious if they ever get redemption arc. But it seems like they always want to do redemption arcs when they have these human villains, and I don't know. I always found her to be interesting because she was so menacing for being such a little kid. And now there's this whole thing about like, oh, you just wanted friends, and Rin just wanted friends, so she connects with you, and it's very generic, and I'm just not about that. And that's kind of the thing about the show overall. Again, part of the reason I stopped doing the weekly reviews because it ended up being like, this is okay, this isn't so great, I hate Hotaro. But seriously, like, just talking about the state of the show, overall it's fine, but Hotaro is the only thing really dragging it down. Like, honestly, if he was just a normal, like the most boring protagonist of all time, it would make the show that much more enjoyable. And they're going on this arc about him needing to change and improve, but I feel like he hasn't changed at all. He's just the same annoying little... He's just so awful, especially in this episode. He's like, do you like my food? Like, oh my god! Punch yourself in the face. He's just so terrible. He's really the only thing dragging the show down in a really significant way. Otherwise, it would just be a very mediocre show. Because the show has improved since, like, I stopped watching it. Not watching it, I'm watching it, but I mean stopped reviewing it regularly, like weekly, like we've done this kind of season 2 refresh, and I've talked about this in a couple other videos, but this feels like what the show should have been like the whole time. There's more interesting things going on, there's not as much filler. In Rider, we have had these like refresh arcs, you know, it feels like different seasons within the show, but this really feels like they almost acknowledged what was going on, like this isn't working, and it feels like a reboot, but also feels like this is how the show should have been the whole time. There's still nothing exceptional about the show. It still feels very generic. Like, I've said that a bunch of times, but everything going on with, like, the plot of the Academy ousting them and them setting up their own little operation at the restaurant feels like a combination of both the Saber story when sort of Logos was corrupt, and also Aruto's story when he was ousted from the company and set up his own little company. Like, all the stories going on feel like they took different plots we've seen in Rider series and ran it through AI, and this is what it made. Like, it's much more enjoyable currently because there's actual plots going on, multiple plots, so it's much more engaging when you're watching it. But at this moment, at least for me, and I want to know from you guys, is there anything you feel about Gotchard that is unique? Because there are a lot of Rider shows, Toku, especially Rider and Sentai, are extremely formulaic. One of the most formulaic things I watch. But almost always, even when you have some formulaic series, there will be like one thing about it that's different, at least, that's its own identity. And outside of obviously Gotchard having a different aesthetic all its own, everything feels like it's been done before. And I'm not seeing anything that feels like it's its own identity. Like, especially coming off Geats, which was quite different in a lot of ways. And even Revice. Like, I want to use this as a good example because, you know, when I was watching Geats, I was really liking how it was so different. And then when I was still kind of having that Rider bug and I went back to finish catching up on Revice, it took me a minute to get in the groove because Revice was a little bit more cut from the traditional Rider cloth. But even Revice, that has a lot of those similar Rider patterns, has things about it that make it feel distinct. Like, off the top of my head, in terms of characters, like with the demons, you know, everyone having their own different demon not only brought in different personalities, but it was about the theme of the show with demons and how everyone deals with them differently. That was something different about Revice, in my opinion. Even when it came to, and the plot itself, like with the GIF and stuff, was all fairly generic, but you would have even surprises that I remember in the plot, like the dad being Veil. Like, obviously we knew stuff was happening with the dad. They foreshadowed that very early, but I didn't see it coming that he was going to be this complete badass. He was this like lovable, goofy dad, and then he comes in and just freaking wrecks stuff. That's what's missing, I think, with Gotchard. Like, they've improved. I'll give them props for that. There's a lot more serialization going on. It's much more enjoyable to watch, but there hasn't been a surprise or a plot point or something that I feel like this is distinctly Gotchard despite everything else going on. So the last thing I wanted to mention in regards to this sort of new era is, I don't remember if I've touched on this character before, but there is like this new character whose name I can't remember. I'm really good at remembering the Toku names, guys. This girl that works with Valvarad, that's been working with him the whole time, that created the Valvarad system and is working with him to make his Rider system. I really like that character. And this feels like she should have been there the whole time. And the show acts like she's been there the whole time in the background, and I think her existing gives Valvarad a much more fitting place in the show, if that makes any sense. Like, before he just kind of showed up to be like, hey, I'm the generic badass character. I don't like the main character, but later I'm going to adopt all his values, just like Rin's adopting his values currently. And, like, that's it. He was kind of just nothing. And this makes him feel like he has more of his own place in the show, more of his own story. I think it makes him fit in a little bit better, gives him a more fun dynamic, and I really have been enjoying that aspect. So, yeah, overall, an okay debut for Rin. Hotaro is really the only thing dragging the show down like supremely for me. Like I said, they have improved. It's very generically enjoyable. Nothing unique about it as of yet, but at least it's not so bad that it's like, honestly, the only thing that's hard to watch is Hotro. Everything else is like a little bit better. So I'm hoping it continually improves. I will be back next week to talk about Valverod's debut, and then we'll see when the next check-in is. But what do you think? What did you think of Rin's debut? Do you think the show has improved? Has it improved enough for you? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. See you notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.